Anna, thank you for being on the call today, and thank you for doing the interview. And I'm so excited to be speaking to you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
It is 6 a.m. your time,
It
but
is.
thank you for doing it. And we'll talk a little about your schedule in a second. But maybe you can just take a quick minute to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, so I spent the vast majority of my career working for a tech company, and I have three children. I have been working remotely for almost my entire career, working from home. And then a couple of years ago, I had a big career pivot moment, and I left working at the company that I was at, and I went into content marketing and journalism. So now I'm a freelance writer in addition to being a mother of three. My kids are now 14, 12, and 6.
And you're a big proponent of flexible work. And I think motherhood maybe got you into that. Would you?
Yes. So interestingly, I began working remotely before I became a parent about 3 years prior. And it was just, it had to do with where my husband was working and where I was working. And I'd relocated for a job, and they told me I could go back to my hometown. But I really stuck to a very traditional schedule. Like I worked when everybody else worked, because everybody else was in the office except for me. And when I became a parent in 2009, all of a sudden my priorities changed. I still wanted to get my work done, but I also had an infant that I needed to accommodate in my life. And so shortly after that, the company that I was at actually embraced workplace flexibility for everyone, that you work whenever you want, whatever hours you want. And so I really took advantage of that and kind of formed my work around my family. And then as my family grew, I kind of embraced that even more. So I still could get my work done, but it maybe wasn't the hours that were typical, or I try to condense my work into shorter time period, become really efficient so I could get more done in less time, which has just been crucial. I mean, like essential for me as a working parent.
Did you know about Parkinson's law?
I didn't at the time. I do now. I'm familiar with it. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I didn't know anything about Parkinson's law until maybe a few months ago. And I was like, oh my God, it was a game changer when I learned it. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, so I just have to allocate less time and I will get
Yes.
it done.
You'll get it done. Right. And I think mothers in particular are just brutally efficient. Like we can get stuff done because we're laser focused, so that we have the time to do other things that motherhood requires.
So yeah, we were talking about Parkinson's law and we were saying that how, we're so laser focused as moms, we have to be, right? Because otherwise it's practically impossible to get stuff done. But what I find amazing about you is that you've shifted your working hours so that you're actually getting up at 3:30 in the morning. Like you
Yes.
did the interview. I thought I was nuts getting up at 5. The only time I used to get up at 3:30 in the morning was when I was doing my master's program with a
Yeah.
full job, but I didn't have kids at the time. I need to ask you, what time do you sleep?
I go to bed usually about 8 p.m. So I have like a full shift of my days starts really early and is done basically early as well.
But are your kids in bed before 8?
My youngest, we put her in her room at 7. I don't think she goes to sleep. I think she plays or whatever, but we're basically done with her.
Wow.
And my older two, I mean, they're in middle school here,
Yeah.
and they're self-sufficient. Like I just like I'm done for the day. And
Right.
so they don't probably go to bed that early either, but they don't need me at that point.
So you get a good, it's about 7 hours of sleep.
Yeah, 6 to 7, just depending on how well I sleep.
And then 3:30 in the morning, you do a lot of your writing work. Is that right? Do you do all your deep work then? Is that what you do?
So the mornings are mostly for my what I would call my personal writing or writing that's for me. I have Substack, I'm on Medium, I have a newsletter, so I do all of that in the morning. And then once I take a break, get my kids ready for school, get them out the door, and then I have another big chunk in the morning where I'm working on writing for clients because I'm a freelance writer. So that's kind of my next chunk of deep focus work. And then by mid-morning, I'm hungry and tired and stuff. So I eat lunch, take a nap, and then I might do some more in the afternoon. But by the time my kids are done with the school day, most of the time I'm done working.
Wow. So you do all your personal writing in the morning and you have Medium, Substack, and is that
And
three?
I also have a blog and I publish like tutorials about how to use different tools and
Yes.
things like that. So it's one of the things in one of the places that I publish that I work on in the morning.
So do you batch create or do you just pick a platform and that's what you write on that day?
It's usually a platform specific. So, my newsletter will be on a certain day of the week. My Substack will be on a certain day of the week. And then the only things that I do in batches are things like social posts, LinkedIn, I'm on Threads, and I just do that in the morning time on the weekends.
Right. So you have quite a structured day then. Like it sounds like it's very routined. Like you've got your
It,
mornings, what you're doing, and then you
yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. But as most working moms will know, sometimes things go completely awry. And usually that'll happen like during the day. Maybe one of my kids gets sick and I have to pick them up from school, or we have a doctor's appointment that goes longer than expected. So if I have to, I will work in the evening to get usually client work to get something done so it's delivered on time. And then I'll just like drink a late cup of coffee and stay awake. So if I have to, I have this buffer at the end of the day that I try not to use, but life happens and sometimes I do dig into that time.
so it's good that you've managed to find a way to kind of adjust around as much as you're trying to be structured, you're still quite flexible because you have to be. And I think this is something I struggle with a lot. And I think a lot of working moms, especially in our position where we're working from home, I find that if I don't have structure, I really struggle to get things done. But
Yeah.
then, as you said, the day is never predictable. Like I might have to go pick up my kid, or my kid's at home because she's not feeling well today, or, maybe I'm not feeling inspired to write something today,
Yeah.
so other stuff, and then I have to move. It is quite like today, for example, I had a 3.5 hour workshop and I have then this call. And obviously today I've just been kind of out there all day. So I don't know how I can be productive for the rest of the day. But
Yeah.
then if I'm not, I've lost a couple of hours. And I always feel like there's so much to get done. But I guess you just have to be flexible and maybe to have an early night and then just do a little bit more the next day or something. You say that in your interview that you can never have true balance, right? Like some days there's more work and some days it's more kids. And how did you come around to embracing that? We still have this desire to achieve work-life balance. And I think if you just accept that it doesn't exist,
It doesn't exist. Yeah.
easier to kind of deal with the fact that you don't have balance. So talk to me a little bit about how you do it and how what kind of mindset you've adopted to be able to deal with the million things we have to juggle on a daily basis.
Yeah. So when I worked for a tech company, my final role, I was a product manager and a member of the executive team. And product management, when you get to close to releasing a new version of the product, like right before release, it's nuts. Like it's a really demanding time because everybody's trying to crunch and get this new feature or new product out the door. And so going through that, I was like, well, this whole team is depending on me to kind of keep this project moving, get it to this release state. So there would be this huge push. And I was like, well, I need to do that. That's part of my job. And then, there'd be other times when it's like, my kid is sick for a week. Little kids, they get viruses and things like that. They're not in daycare the whole time. So it's like, well, then I need to focus on that. So I kind of came to this realization that sometimes work needs me a lot, and sometimes my family needs me a lot. And so it's not about a balance necessarily. It's about the ability and the flexibility to choose, to say, okay, work needs me. I need to figure out life, everything, not that my kids take a back seat, but though, I have to do a little bit less with my family right now, maybe than I otherwise would, or my family really needs me right now. And so they have to come first and work has to come second. And so it's more of just an up and down than a split between work and family. It's just, I can't control what happens on either sometimes.
Sure. And I think on the similar lines, a really good friend of mine told me once that, every decision you make is a sacrifice.
Yeah.
Essentially, so, when you're, although I don't like the word sacrifice, but like when you're with your kids a lot, your work takes takes the
Yeah.
back burner. And then when your work is very demanding, your kids, and it kind of does balance out maybe over time. So
Yeah.
some version of balance there. You've actually written a good article, and I'm going to share it in the interview with anyone who wants to read it, about how becoming a parent improved your career. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So the 3 years that I worked for a tech company before I became a parent, and probably even, jobs I had in college and before that, I was very driven. I worked a lot of time, and, I liked things to be done on schedule and stick to my commitments and things like that. And I expected everybody around me to work the same way. And so I would get frustrated when, I remember a colleague that, she had young kids and they were sick all the time, because that's just life with kids. And I remember just not understanding that. I think that's a huge thing that people don't understand until they have small children, is they get sick all the time. And so I was very rigid in thinking that work had to be done a certain way, and people had to accommodate that. Like life, like during your working hours, you were working. When I had my son and he was an infant, I was like, oh, wow, there's a lot that I cannot control. And work shouldn't, work has to fit around that. They have to coexist. And it made me more empathetic, I think, to other people, just any life situation. And really it just made me see things differently. It really, being a parent really made me understand how much we need to kind of integrate work and life. They have to coexist. It doesn't matter if you're a parent, or maybe you're caring for an elderly person, or maybe you have a pet or something, but those things should be able to coexist.
Yeah. Yeah, I think thanks, the best thing that came out of COVID, and I hate saying the best thing,
Yeah,
anything.
but something that came out.
Yeah, I think the whole shift in our mindset of remote work and flexibility in schedules really came to the surface in a crazy, in volumes after COVID. And I'm so grateful that that's happened, because I had a 2-year-old before COVID, and then my son was actually born on the first day of lockdown. And as a mom of two small kids, flexibility in your work is like and that's what I love so much about what you advocate for. Like, it's the freedom to choose. You don't have to be an entrepreneur, or you don't have to have your own, you shouldn't just have to have your own business to be able to choose how you use your time. I know you write about this a lot, but are you actively involved in any organizations or anything in terms of incorporating this into systems, or it's just something you're very vocal about in your writing?
It's just something I'm vocal about because I've lived through it, because I've been working remotely for much longer than other people. I mean, I've been working remotely since 2006.
Yeah.
So I've been the only remote employee within a company. I've been at fully remote companies. I've been at global companies. I've been at companies that were remote but synchronous. So like even though everybody was remote, they kind of still all worked from 8 to 4 or whatever, which I hated. And so I've been through so many different varieties of remote work. And I was remote before COVID. So a lot of people became remote at that time. And it's like, well, that's not that it's not real remote work, but that's like remote work in a hurry. You know,
Mhm.
it wasn't not a lot of companies that went remote at that time. It wasn't well thought out. It wasn't planned. And so people struggled with how do you manage a remote team? How do you become productive at home if you're not used to it? And so I started talking about because I'm like, I've done all these things. I worked for a company that very, very intentionally went from being mostly in office to fully remote and very flexible work. And so I started talking about because I thought, well, I have something to share here. I have experience that a lot of people don't have. And so I can kind of guide people who maybe feel frustrated by working at home, or they feel like they can't get as much done, or they feel like their family's always around and things like that. So how do you feel like you're not always working? Because I think that's a pitfall of remote work is you can feel like you're always on. And so how to be productive at home and really like reap the benefits of flexible work.
Yeah, and I think you've got such great articles on it. So, what would you say for a working mom who's in a position where she doesn't have flexible work? So her organization is not flexible. What kind of advice would you give that person? Would you suggest they advocate for their own flexibility or move
Um,
jobs? It's a tricky question.
yeah, it is a tricky question. It depends on how much that person feels constrained by the lack of flexibility. Maybe they have good support systems or a spouse or feel okay with the childcare coverage they have or things like that. And so it's not really impeding on their work life, even though maybe they wish it were more flexible where they can make it work. But I would say if it's really something that you're struggling with, I would say change jobs. I mean, and that's hard, especially in the current job market, but it can be so incredibly stressful as a working parent to do all the things that you need to do, especially when things happen during the day. And unfortunately, I think women are punished for asking for flexibility more than men are. Um, and so, if you go to an employer and say, hey, can I have this accommodation? One, either they'll say no, or it might hold you back in some way if they think you're asking for a special favor. So I would say if a company doesn't allow flexibility, asking for it probably isn't going to get very far or it's going to hurt you down the line. So I would say it's worth looking. It's worth putting the time in to find something else.
At what point did you move into full solopreneurship? So into full freelance,
So I became a freelancer in October of 2022. So 18 months ago.
right? Right after, almost at the end, tail end of COVID.
Yeah. So I left my tech job in February 2021. That's when I went into content marketing and journalism. And then I spent about 18 months at content agencies and then went out on my own.
Cool. All right. I loved your parenting mantra from Survivor.
Yes, the TV show Survivor. And I was never a big fan of the TV show Survivor, but I remember somebody asked me a long time ago, like, how do you think about parenting? I'm like, well, parenting is like Survivor, outwit, outplay, outlast.
I struggle with all those three things. My kids are really small, so I'm all usually on the losing end of all those three things. So I don't know how you've
I'll
done
give
it.
an example of outplay, or, like I always say, like, don't make parenting harder than it needs to be. And so one of the parenting things that I think is hard for everybody is any family that does the tooth fairy, right? Kids lose their teeth, you stick it under the pillow, and now you have to like wait till the kid falls asleep and then like sneak into their room and put change under their pillow. And it's just hard. And like, so when my oldest son first lost like his second tooth, I forgot. Like I fell asleep and I forgot to be the tooth fairy. And he's like, the tooth fairy didn't come. So I got smarter. And so the next time he lost a tooth, I left a note under his pillow and I told him how overworked the tooth fairy is. And she has to work every single day. And Santa only has to work one day a year. It's just really hard. And so the tooth fairy said, if I don't have to come until you have lost all of your teeth, I will give you more money. And it had a little checkbox, sign yes or no. And he checked yes and signed his name. And boom, tooth fairy didn't have to come again. And I've done that with all three of my kids, and all three of them said yes to wanting more money if the tooth fairy didn't have to come.
That's hilarious. So you outwitted them and outplayed.
Outplayed them. I'm like, this is too hard. Like I cannot be the tooth fairy. So.
And have they ever discussed this with you now that they're older?
So my older two are past tooth fairy age, but my oldest, who is now 14, he came to claim when he's like, I lost all my teeth. I think the tooth fairy needs to make a deposit into my.
Oh, was it around to remind
I did pay up. Yeah, I paid up.
Cool. So the question is, who was outplayed?
Well, I promised. I said I said if I don't have to do this, I will give you money.
You talk in your interview about how learning to be content with what you accomplish in the hours that you have. And how do you do that? Like you said, now I'm working for myself and I'm a solopreneur and I do feel like I'm always working, but I'm choosing to because I'm building my own business at the moment.
Yeah.
I'm at that stage where I'm almost never happy with how much I've accomplished because I think I have a big mountain to climb. So how did you work with your mindset? And I guess it is quite similar in freelancing, and because also you're running your own show. How did you come to be, how did you change your mindset to just be okay with this is what I've done today, and that's okay, and I'm going to go to bed, get some good sleep. And then, because I end up overcompensating after the kids go to bed, and then I'll stay up to like midnight, and then the law of diminishing returns comes in, right? Where you're like, you're working, doing something for 2 hours, which you could have done in 10 minutes the next morning.
Yes.
And then that occurs to me, and then I stop working and go to bed. But it's not easy.
It isn't easy. And I'm not like saying that I'm great at being okay with what I've accomplished. I think exactly what you mentioned, which is the sleep factor, is an overruling factor for me because I get up early. By the time 8 p.m. rolls around, or maybe 9, maybe at the latest, like I can't do anymore. Like my brain is just, it's done. And because my work is very creative based, like I could stare at a screen and nothing will come out. And so whatever happened during the day, I can't do anymore. Like it won't be good. I won't be happy with it. I'll do it if it's client work because I have to meet a deadline. So that's when I'll drink the coffee and keep going. But other than that, like I have to just say, I'm okay with this. I will also say that it has gotten easier as my kids get older. I went into content marketing, journalism. My kids, my youngest was more like a toddler at the time. And it was harder to get things done. And so I kind of see that light in the tunnel that parents are like, oh, someday your kids will be self-sufficient and they won't depend on you as much. Like if one of my older kids is sick, they don't need me during the day. They can make themselves a sandwich and hang out in their room. So I kind of keep that in mind, that things do get easier. The more I do, the more routine based some of my work is, the more I know how long it takes me. And so I can that becomes more predictable, but there's a never ending list. Like there are so many things I wish I could do. So I think the way that I've dealt with it is just telling myself like, I won't give up sleep. I just can't. Like I can't, like my body can't. And so I have to be okay with what I can control, which was what happens during the day. And there are so many things I can't control. And so I just have to kind of make peace with that and do what I can.
And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about AI, and we've touched upon it a little bit in the interview. So, what are your thoughts about AI entering our world, especially in our field of communications and writing and journalism? So many tools available now for better writing, better structuring of sentences, ideation, all of that. So, how do you feel about AI in your space? And where do you think it's going? Are you using it?
So I think that I've always been like a tools person. Like that's something I'm kind of known for in my writing and in social is I talk about tools, I talk about automation. So I do like things that can kind of speed up different parts of the process or make my life easier. As a journalist and somebody who writes often from like personal perspective, like AI is never going to replace that. Like the client work that I do, they're not expecting, I'm not even expected to use it, or I'm told directly not to use it because they want like that experience, something that's unique. And that's what's going to make them stand out from their competitors, right? I use AI for things like fine tuning sentences, like Grammarly is basically a type of AI. I might use it for quick ideation. I use a tool called Perplexity, which is an alternative to Google search because I think Google, the search results are not great in some cases, or I see 4 articles, I have to click into each one to see what I need. Perplexity summarizes the top searches for me and then gives me a citation so I can go read the original. So that's the way that my research process has been sped up. But overall, I think generative AI, the way it is right now, is not a substitute for human writers. It might be a supplement. It's a tool. It's an assistant. You can use it to, poke holes in your argument or things like that. But to really stand out, I think it's going to become even more dependent on that human element. Otherwise, it's just going to all kind of sound the same because AI is limited by the data. It can only do so much with the data it has. It can't replicate a lived experience that you might have.
And how do you think it's going to affect our kids or their lives as they grow up? I know this is a very big topic and can be talked about hours, but what's your immediate take on it?
I think it'll just become part of what they do. And we may not know what that is yet, but like, people used to not use a calculator. And then they learned how to use a calculator and they learned how to use the tool. And so my kids in school, when they're little, they learn how to add, right? Like they learn functionally how to add. But then when they get older, they use a calculator to do that, right? So they still know like the underlying principles of math, but now a tool can help them do things more efficiently. So I don't know like what exactly or how it'll augment their lives, but I think I saw my son's school, it's like, here, come take a class on how to use AI. And I don't even know what, like how, like what they were going to teach them. I have a friend who teaches at the university level. And so her university is having a discussion, like they can't keep it out of the classroom. So how do they incorporate it into the work that they're doing? I just think we don't know what those things are yet, but it will be, part of their daily work in some way.
Yeah. Yes, we will see what happens 5 years from now. But I guess it's a bit the same, like you said, the calculator. The internet is just a bigger example of that,
Exactly.
Like I think there were similar fears when the internet came out. And now I just don't remember how we lived without the internet.
Correct.
Like,
Yeah, exactly.
although, it's really enhanced our life for the better. And I feel like AI is just kind of like an appendage almost to that,
I
Um,
remember in college writing a paper and Wikipedia was new at the time. And I don't think the professors knew it or understood it. And so I cited Wikipedia in a paper, but now a professor would say, absolutely not, go find the primary source. But at the time we didn't know. And we're kind of in that era with AI, or, we didn't know that you couldn't trust every single source on the internet. And so we're in that with AI right now, where it's like, we don't quite know how to apply it. We will, we'll know like what good use cases are, what good use cases aren't. Schools, universities, they'll all come up with what you can and can't do with papers and how they'll detect it, things like that. So
Do you fear AI
no,
in, in any way?
no.
No.
I mean, maybe like in the existential or the robot's gonna like wipe out the human race type of way, but like in
Yeah,
terms in
yeah, yeah.
terms of like, is it coming for my work? No, I don't think so. You know, I've worked in banking for a long time. And so another example I think of is the ATM, which came about in like, I think the late 70s or early 80s. It didn't replace tellers. Tellers were dispensing cash before that. And then the ATM came along. It's like, okay, we don't need tellers to dispense cash, but tellers can do other things. It wasn't
Mm.
like there were suddenly a whole bunch of unemployed tellers around. They just did other work that an ATM couldn't do. And now, you know, ATMs have evolved into doing other things. And again, tellers are filling a more human-centric function in serving customers or talking to them. And so I always think about that also because I've worked in the banking industry for a long time. It's like I don't know that AI is necessarily coming for jobs. They're coming for maybe a specific type of work, and maybe some people will be displaced, but that's happened throughout history. That's happened with the auto industry, with the assembly line and things like that. So there's always these huge shifts in technology, and then yes, some people are impacted, but then they go do other work.
Yeah, I think people forget that with any kind of revolution, there's so much new stuff that comes up that new jobs will be created. In fact, they predict that
Right.
there will be more new jobs created than there will be jobs lost.
Yeah,
So
right. We're just in that flux right now where we don't quite know exactly what the outcome will be, but you're exactly right. Like it's just going to be kind of a shift from one type of work to a different type of work.
I also feel that the way you use AI or embrace AI or not will be your experience of AI. So a bit like the internet, like if you choose to use it to augment your life and your work, then it will. But if you choose to demonize it, it will, and that's what will happen. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. But as you said, who knows? We're in this paradigm shift. And I feel very fortunate that in our lives, we've seen the internet and AI, two big shifts, and a pandemic.
Yes, it's a lot.
A lot, right? And I'd like to believe that I'm still only like halfway through my life, I still have a long time to go. So cool. And I think
And I'll add one more thing. AI or any technology change, they're not going away, right? And so people who maybe don't adopt technology, it becomes harder for them, right? At some point, like let's say you don't want to use a smartphone or something like that. Well, then certain things become harder. Like a restaurant now, you have to use a QR code to view the menu in some places. And so you almost have to kind of adjust to those things, or you're going to hit limitations of like what you can do to function in society, kind of whether you like it or not. And so I think those you almost just have to, like, it's just part of kind of adapting to the world around you, is figuring out how to use new technology in a way that makes sense for you.
yes, no, absolutely. And I think as little as 5 years from now, we're going to see this conversation will be totally different.
It will be, yeah, absolutely.
Great. I just have one last question for you. You said a really cool thing you watched, which I was not expecting to read in your interview, was Barbie. That is not the film I expected. Quote. I haven't seen it yet, although I want to. I don't think my husband would want to watch it. I don't know, but I'm guessing my
Yeah.
husband would watch it, which is why I haven't watched it, and we don't get much TV time. So I do want to watch it. So I'd love to hear from you why you decided to talk about Barbie and that you
Uh,
really enjoyed it.
so I don't get a lot of TV time either. Like movies for me are rare. I'll usually stick to like a TV show that's, like 30 to 45 minutes if I'm going to watch TV. But I sat down and I watched my 6-year-old daughter really wanted to watch Barbie. And so I made my kids, we all watched it together. It was totally, I was not expecting what that movie was about at all. Which was about female empowerment and, Barbie land, women rule the world, and Barbie goes to the real world and realizes that men rule the world. And what a horrible realization for her to come to. Like, what do you mean women are not treated the same as men? What do you mean that men have all these advantages that women don't have? And so that was the crux of the movie. And if anybody hasn't seen it and just wants like a little taste, go on YouTube and find America Ferrera. She won the Oscar, right? Or I think won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress. Just Google like her speech. It's like 2 minutes long, and she starts with, "It is so hard to be a woman. We are told behave this way, look this way, don't be too aggressive, don't be too passive, look great all the time." Like she's like, it's just literally impossible to be a woman because of all the demands that are put on us. And it's exhausting. And like probably every person watching that, like I'm gonna get choked up thinking about it, was like, yes, that is my experience. And I remember I showed the clips to my husband. He hadn't seen the whole movie, but I said, just watch this. He's like, is that how you feel? I'm like, yes, that's how we feel as women all the time. So
So,
I highly recommend it. It was totally unexpected and I loved it.
oh, nice to know. I was wondering whether I could watch it because my daughter is 6.
You
So,
can.
yeah,
There's stuff that is probably more adult-ish would probably go over her head.
yeah,
So,
no
and
harm. Yeah.
no.
Yeah, okay, good to know. Maybe that's something. My husband's away next week, so maybe me and my daughter will watch Barbie.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Anna. This has been a real pleasure. I'm so happy to have connected with you. And one thing I wanted to mention in the beginning of the interview is how I found you. I found you because I think we write in similar circles and we are
Yeah.
connected with people because I'm a writer. I'm also on Medium. I'm also on Substack. I'm also on all these platforms, and I'm also a journalist and a writer. So I think we have
Yeah.
and I think I found journalism
Overlap.
first, a lot of overlap. And then I actually connected, I saw your interview with Brian from Why
Yes.
I Left, Brian Akar,
Yeah.
and ended up interviewing me, and that's how I connected with you. And now I'm talking to you, and I find that so awesome
Yeah.
because that's the internet. I'm going to have to send this clip to Brian when it's out,
Yeah.
so that it's like a full 360. Now
Yeah.
you
Brian's
meet
podcast.
Brian.
Yeah, Brian's podcast, Why I Left, is really great. He's just an excellent interviewer. And I had found him because somebody I knew was a guest on his podcast. So I pitched him to be a guest, and yeah, very full circle.
Yeah, it is full circle. And I was really impressed because Brian's podcast was the first one I've ever done.
Oh,
Yeah, and I was amazed that he agreed, and obviously it made sense because I had just quit my job. So
yeah,
it was like totally fitted his podcast, and I was amazed at how professional he was and how planned he is, and the
yes,
prep and the the questions and the branding and the setup. And I'm like, if I ever do a podcast, I'm gonna have to take all his notes and just kind of copy his model because he does it so well, and he has a full-time job.
yeah,
So yeah, no, it's so great. So yeah, so thank you very much, Anna. I think the fact that I really enjoyed doing this interview, and I think your written interview is done, so it should be out quite soon, and I will let you know.
all right, that sounds
But please
excellent.
stay connected, and I'm really happy to have made this connection with you. And that's what I love about the online space, and also like having a newsletter, is that
Yeah,
you could build connections and a community from there. So
yeah. And like you said, you connect all these
so
little connections, right? Like so
random.
many. Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Anna, and be in touch. I'm
All
just
right,
gonna
sounds good.